within the human frame. There is no supernatural external influence mentioned at all. In fact, it's the opposite. It's the human heart, and he even goes to such an extent to say that above all things, the heart is deceitful. And so there's no room for a supernatural influence here.
Well, I'm sure even our audience at home can identify with these same impulses of the heart that here we see in Scripture itself, that proclaims and pinpoints the very source of the problems of Israel of old, that when we take it in context in Jeremiah 17:9, it is simply a warning and a condemnation for their idolatry, which, again, taking in context, they were on the verge of their doom, as it was spelled out by Jeremiah, and they must have had to, beyond the shadow of a doubt, accept their own punishment as the consequences of their sinfulness. Now, if one were to be quite honest with themselves, they know that the source of their own sin is something that comes from within, from the very heart of man, and we have no one else to blame. This is becoming very interesting. Norm, do you have any other scriptures to support this further thought?
Yes, Peter. I believe it's a theme that's contained right from the very beginning of Scripture, and that is that man has no one to blame but himself for the things that he has done wrong. And so, Peter, let's go right back to the first book of the Bible, the book of Genesis, and look at Genesis chapter 4 and verses 5 to 7. And here we read, this is God speaking to Cain. But unto Cain and to his offering he had not respect. And Cain was very wroth, or as the word means, very angry. And his countenance fell. And the Lord said unto Cain, Why art thou wroth? And why has thy countenance fallen? If thou doest well, shalt thou not be accepted? And if thou doest not well, sin lieth at the door, and unto thee shall be his desire, and thou shalt rule over him. Mm-hmm. Now, here's a perfect example, Peter, of a situation where God is actually trying to get Cain to reverse his attitude. He's saying to Cain, if you do well, you will be accepted. But if you don't do well, there's a consequence. Mm. And he pinpoints what it was that would cause him not to do well. And in the Scripture, it's actually, if you'll note, it says, sin lieth at the door.
Yes. And
here sin is personified as an animal that's ready to crouch on its prey. And any modern translation will actually render it that way. And so here we have a situation right from the beginning where God pinpoints the actual reason why Cain could not do what was right. He was so angry, yes, filled with anger, he could not overcome his own human emotions. And thus, in the end, what did he do? He killed his brother.
Yes. And as our Bible students at home realize, that this was the first example of murder in Scripture that resulted in one unable to control his heart, the raging monster of wrath, as it were, within. And it was an animal that Cain didn't, but that we all realize that we need to tame, as it were. I'm sure Genesis, the foundation of all Scripture, has a few more examples of the very heart of man.
Exactly, Peter. And we see that once again as we follow through in Genesis chapter 6. Now let's turn to Genesis chapter 6, and in particular, verses 5 to 7. Peter, maybe you could read those for us.
Certainly. And God saw that the wickedness of man was great in the earth, and that every imagination of the thoughts of his heart was only evil continually. And it repented the Lord that he had made man on the earth, and it grieved him at his heart. And the Lord said, I will destroy man whom I have created from the face of the earth, both man and beast, and the creeping thing, and the fowls of the air, for it repented me that I have made them.
You notice, Peter, in this statement, there are a couple of key items that we take to note. And that is the fact that God saw that the wickedness of man was great. And he names the root cause. And that is that his heart is evil from his youth up. Something else to remember here, Peter, is that if there is a supernatural influence controlling mankind and causing them to sin, then we have once again kind of like a contradiction. That this verse plagued me, just like the verses we looked at earlier. And the statement here, God says, it repented the Lord that he had made man, or he regretted that he had made man. Now, if indeed man is sinning because of all of this supernatural evil influence outside causing him to sin, then it's ironic that God would make the statement, I repented that I have made man.
Good
It
point.
should have been the opposite. We never see anywhere in the scripture where God says, I do regret that I have made the angels, which really is the problem if we look at it from the Orthodox way of thinking.
Exactly. We can certainly see that inside man's thinking is very heart. But how is man any different than he is today? What was it that so invoked God's wrath to destroy the entire earth?
Well, Peter, let's read the next passage, and then we'll answer that question after we read the next passage. Okay. And then the next passage is just a few verses later, in verses 11 and 13 of Genesis chapter 6.
Okay.
And here we read, the earth was also corrupt before God, and the earth was filled with violence. And God looked upon the earth, and behold, it was corrupt, for all flesh had corrupted his way upon the earth. And God said unto Noah, the end of all flesh is come before me, for the earth is filled with violence through them. And behold, I will destroy them with the earth. So, in answer to your question, Peter, the earth was in a situation where it was filled with violence, it was filled with wickedness. We see the word corrupt come up here a number of times. But the point again, Peter, if we look at one of the final statements in this passage here, it identifies the true reason why the earth was corrupt and filled with violence. It specifically says that in the latter portion there, the violence was a result, it makes a statement, the earth is filled with violence through them. Now, who do you think them is in this passage?
That's obviously mankind.
That's right. So once again, indicating that the source of the wickedness and the source of the corruption was man himself, and not any supernatural influence outside the human realm.
Now, did this great cataclysm of events, such as been proven many times over through archaeology and Scripture, bearing out that Scripture is indeed a fact, did this great flood actually destroy evil once and for all?
No, Peter. We read in Genesis chapter 8, if we could just look at Genesis chapter 8 and read verse 21. Peter, would you read that for us?
Certainly. And the Lord smelled a sweet savor, and the Lord said in his heart, I will not again curse the ground any more for man's sake. For the imagination of man's heart is evil from his youth. Neither will I again smite any more everything living as I have done.
Right. So this is a statement that's made after the flood. And we only have Noah and his family remaining. But God still makes the statement that the imagination of man's heart is evil from his youth. So no, the destruction of the human family at the flood did not change anything. Man's heart is still evil from his youth up.
Now, again, the Bible is one harmonious book. Is there anything of a comment of the days of Noah and the flood and the destruction of the earth that's mentioned in the New Testament?
Yes, Jesus said in Matthew chapter 24, he says that as it was in the days of Noah, it will be the same at the coming of the Son of Man. And just look at our earth today,
Yes.
and we can see the violence that's in the earth. And I think even in our day, I've experienced it, and I'm sure you've experienced it. People who never thought about religious matters, say 20 years ago, are all of a sudden now thinking about the condition of the earth and how it relates to religious matters. In fact, CNN, they've documented, is this Armageddon as foretold in the Bible? And they've done this simply because they see the earth in such a condition that they've never seen it before.
And I think with that interesting point, we're going to have to leave it off there. We've got a lot more detailed Bible verses that we would like to look at in our part 2. And please look forward to the sequel as we present to you the true identity of the devil. Thank you very much for watching. If you have any questions, you'll see the number listed at the bottom of your screen. Thank you.